Why are medieval art inscriptions so hard to read? Imagine walking through a medieval church or cathedral and trying to read the tiny, ornate writing carved into stone or painted on walls. It can be like trying to decipher a secret code. That is because medieval inscriptions are often very difficult to read. There are several reasons for this, and understanding them helps us see how art, culture, and religion shaped these works. First, the styles of writing used in medieval times are very different from what we see today. During the Middle Ages, especially from the 13th to the 15th centuries, artists and scribes used Gothic scripts. These scripts include Gothic minuscule, spiky writing, and Gothic texture. They are dense, angular, and highly stylized, with letters that look compressed or broken. This makes them look complicated and unfamiliar to modern eyes. The shift from simple Roman capitals to these Gothic styles introduced forms that are harder to read without special training. Even within Gothic scripts, small differences can make reading even more challenging. Second, the materials and techniques used in creating these inscriptions also play a role. Many inscriptions were part of religious artwork like illuminated manuscripts or painted church walls. These were carefully crafted, often small in size, and meant to blend into the overall design. Over time, the paint or ink faded, and the decorative elements sometimes covered parts of the text. Artists used precious materials like gold leaf and intricate tooling, which added beauty but also caused reflections, or where that made the words harder to see. Sometimes, inscriptions were placed in hard-to-reach spots or hidden within complex designs, making them even more difficult to interpret today. Third, the language and abbreviations used in medieval inscriptions add another layer of difficulty. Latin was the main language for religious and scholarly texts. Scribes often used abbreviations and contractions that were standard at the time but are not obvious now. For example, they might write a word with a few strokes or symbols instead of the full form. Additionally, many inscriptions include Christian symbols or coded language meant to communicate spiritual truths. To understand these, you need to know medieval theology and symbolism, which can be quite complex. From a cultural perspective, inscriptions were not just for decoration or simple messages. They served as tools to teach and reminded viewers of religious stories and moral lessons. Because of this, they were designed to communicate spiritual truths in a symbolic way. The focus was on conveying meaning to an audience familiar with the church's language and imagery, not necessarily on making the writing easy to read for everyone. This meant that the inscriptions often prioritized artistic harmony and religious symbolism over clarity. Today, interpreting these inscriptions requires specialized knowledge. Experts in paleography, the study of ancient writing, help decode the scripts. Knowledge of medieval Latin and local languages is also essential. Understanding the religious and cultural context helps scholars interpret the symbols and abbreviations correctly. This is why reading medieval inscriptions is often a task for historians, art historians, and scholars who spend years learning how these works were created and what they meant. In summary, medieval art inscriptions are hard to read because of their complex Gothic scripts, decorative and material choices, use of Latin with abbreviations, and their symbolic religious content. All of these factors reflected the artistic and spiritual priorities of the time, making these inscriptions fascinating but challenging pieces of history to interpret.